Have you ever stopped to reflect on how much your own thoughts can sabotage you? As if you were trapped inside your own mind, surrounded by invisible barriers that dictate what you cannot do, who you are not capable of being. We all go through this at some point. The mind often becomes our greatest enemy, a battlefield where doubts and fears turn into limitations, distancing us from our true strength. But what if I told you that these thoughts are not you? That they are merely shadows created by old patterns and beliefs that we can transform? Now imagine for a moment that you can not only understand negative thoughts but also change the way you see them, and most importantly, replace them with thoughts that truly empower you, motivate you, and help you achieve your greatest goals. What if I told you that the key to this is within your reach, just waiting to be discovered? The human mind has an incredible power of adaptation. What you think every day shapes your reality. But what if you could reprogram it so that with each thought, you are closer to living the life you've always dreamed of? In this video, we will reveal the secret to transforming your mind, to replacing negative thoughts with positive ones, and how this simple yet powerful adjustment can be the key to genuine change. We will explore together how to replace limiting mental patterns with a new growth mindset, where success, emotional control, and mental liberation become not just possibilities, but tangible realities. Are you ready to take control of your mind and finally live without the invisible chains that hold you back? If the answer is yes, keep watching until the end, because the change begins now, and it starts with you. Reprogramming the mind. How to replace negative thoughts with positive ones. Understanding the power of thoughts, how they shape your reality. When we wake up in the morning, the first thing we do is think. The simple act of opening our eyes is an invitation to the whirlwind of thoughts that often take over our minds. But have you ever stopped to reflect on how powerful these thoughts are? They don't just occupy our mental space. They have the power to shape our entire reality. Each thought, each word we choose to think, begins to trace the path for our emotions, attitudes, and ultimately, our actions. It's as if our mind were a gardener and our thoughts were the seeds. If we sow fear, doubt, or anger, that is what will bloom. But if we opt for positive and constructive thoughts, we will cultivate a very different reality. The great challenge here is understanding that we are not victims of our thoughts. They don't arise randomly or without reason. Often it is we ourselves who feed negative thoughts, allowing them to take root in our minds. A positive mindset is not just a beautiful concept, but a daily practice of organizing the mind and cultivating ideas that truly lead to personal transformation. Self-knowledge allows us to notice when we are feeding negativity and to make a conscious decision to change the direction of our thoughts. This is the power we hold, the ability to choose how we see the world and how we react to it. Imagine now a situation where everything seems to go wrong. What goes through your mind? If the answer is something like, "This is impossible, I'll never succeed," know that these thoughts are not just empty words. They create a vibrational field around you, a reality that becomes increasingly solid as you feed it. However, Stoicism teaches us something crucial. It's not the circumstances that afflict us, but the way we interpret them. Therefore, we can learn to change our interpretation of reality, turning challenges into opportunities and replacing negative thoughts with stronger, more constructive, and more positive ones. The science behind mental reprogramming. How your brain can adapt. In recent years, science has shown something that Stoic philosophers already knew millennia ago. Our brains are malleable, capable of adapting, reprogramming, and strengthening with consistent practice. The concept of neuroplasticity reveals that the brain has the incredible ability to form new neural connections and reconfigure the way we think. This means that, even if you have a pattern of negative or self-limiting thoughts, the brain is perfectly capable of changing with the repetition of new positive thoughts. Just as daily practice of a musical instrument can turn someone into a master, the daily practice of positive thoughts can transform the way you see the world and yourself. Stoic philosophers like Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius already understood this idea of mental transformation, though they didn't explain it through neuroscience. They knew that the mind, like the body, needs training, discipline, and patience. Mental transformation is not instantaneous. It occurs over time with the constant practice of self-control. Just as we lift weights to strengthen muscles, we must exercise our minds to make them stronger, more resilient, and more positive. Each conscious thought we choose to cultivate is a new neural connection that reprograms our reality. The more you think positively, the more your brain adapts to this new thought pattern. Therefore, mental reprogramming is not a distant or abstract idea. It is a real and tangible process that can be undertaken by anyone, at any time. All we need is mental discipline and mindfulness to identify when we are being dragged by old mental patterns and to replace those automatic reactions with new ways of thinking. The brain is, in fact, an extremely powerful tool, but like any tool, it needs to be used with intention and care. When you begin to consciously choose your thoughts, you start to shape the reality around you, creating mental strength and self-mastery. Identifying negative thoughts, the first step to change. We all have thoughts that limit us. They arise silently, often without us noticing, and begin to create a narrative about who we are and what we are capable of achieving. Thoughts like, "This isn't for me," "I'll never be good enough," "I always fail." These are just a few examples of what could be called negative thoughts. They don't arise by accident, but are shaped by past experiences, deeply rooted beliefs, and often automatic reactions to daily situations. However, the first step to mental transformation is learning to identify these thoughts. They are not absolute truths. They are merely reflections of our perception of the world. Identifying negative thoughts is like having a beacon illuminating the shadows that once seemed invisible. When you start observing more closely, you'll notice that many of these thoughts arise automatically and unconsciously, fueling a cycle of self-sabotage. The process is simple yet powerful. You begin to pay attention to the stories your mind is telling you. When a negative thought arises, instead of just accepting it, ask yourself, "Why am I thinking this? What am I really saying to myself?" This allows you to decouple the thought from the emotion, creating space for a conscious choice. This space is where the true power to reprogram the mind resides. The constant practice of observing our own thoughts is fundamental for self-knowledge and emotional control. When we can identify negative thoughts, we begin to see that, often, they are not based on facts or absolute truths, but on old beliefs that we can challenge. This ability to question the ideas our mind offers us is the key to emotional liberation and the building of a strong mind. As the Stoic philosopher Epictetus used to teach, it's not the events that disturb us, but our opinion about them. When we become aware of our thoughts, we begin to rewrite the narrative our mind is trying to impose on us, and with that, we transform our reality. The law of attraction, how positive thoughts attract opportunities. Have you ever noticed how, at certain moments in life, everything seems to conspire in your favor? What seemed like a mere coincidence ends up turning into a sequence of positive events, one after another. On the other hand, at other times, it feels like nothing goes right, as if life were full of insurmountable obstacles. This is not a coincidence. The concept of the law of attraction teaches us that our thoughts have power. When we focus on positive thoughts, we attract opportunities and circumstances that correspond to that energy into our lives. If we focus on what we want to achieve, if we visualize our goals with clarity and conviction, the reality around us begins to align to help us reach them. But it's not just about having positive thoughts passively. The law of attraction requires action as well. Wishing for success, happiness, or peace is futile if we don't take actions aligned with those desires. As Stoic philosophers teach, controlling our minds doesn't just mean replacing negative thoughts, but also acting in accordance with the values and virtues we cultivate. Self-mastery and mindfulness are the pillars of this change, as they allow us to focus on what we can control: our thoughts, our emotions, and consequently, our actions. By doing this, we begin to generate the energy needed to attract opportunities that once seemed distant. The connection between positive thoughts and opportunities is also linked to our growth mindset. When we believe we can improve, that we are capable of achieving our goals, we start to act differently. The simple act of believing in success creates a domino effect, enabling us to seize the opportunities that arise before us with confidence and determination. Mental reprogramming means transforming the way we see the world. Instead of seeing difficulties, we see challenges as opportunities for growth. Emotional detachment also plays a role here, as it allows us to avoid fixating on past failures and instead look forward to the possibilities forming around us. The challenge of change: how to replace a negative thought with a positive one. Change is never easy. In some way, our mind clings to the familiar, even if that means living with negative thoughts that limit us. The reality is that often we prefer negative thoughts because they are known and provide a certain mental comfort. But if we want to achieve success and personal transformation, we need to move beyond this cycle. Replacing a negative thought with a positive one is a daily challenge, but it is an essential step to creating a new positive mindset. The process requires self-mastery, as it demands that we become aware of the thoughts that arise and actively decide to replace them with thoughts that truly propel us forward. The secret lies in understanding that negative thoughts don't arise out of nowhere. They are reflections of beliefs, often limiting, that we hold about ourselves or the world. Change begins with self-knowledge, recognizing these thoughts and, upon identifying them, questioning them. When a thought like "I'm not capable" arises, pause for a moment and reflect: is this really true? Where is the evidence for this? Questioning these automatic thoughts is the first step to transformation. Instead of allowing them to spread and occupy our entire mind, we can consciously choose to replace them with something healthier, more constructive, and more aligned with our goals and values. The constant practice of replacing negative thoughts with positive ones requires patience and mental discipline. It's not about eliminating all difficulties or ignoring obstacles, but reprogramming the mind to focus on solutions instead of fixating on problems. Imagine you are driving toward an important goal. If you keep looking constantly at the rearview mirror, you're likely to lose focus and veer off course. Similarly, if you dwell too much on negative thoughts, it will be very difficult to achieve mental resilience and self-mastery. The key to changing this pattern lies in practicing constant replacement. Over time, this practice will become part of who you are, and your thoughts will begin to reflect a new reality, more positive and more capable of leading you to success. The power of affirmation: how to use positive words to reprogram the mind. When you look at yourself in the mirror in the morning, what do you say to yourself? Often, we start the day with internal criticism, with judgments that weaken and demotivate us. But what would happen if, instead, we began to affirm ourselves with positive words that not only encourage us, but, over time, reprogram our minds? Positive affirmations are not just beautiful phrases said at random. They have the power to shape our reality by strengthening the beliefs that empower us. When we choose words that nourish our self-esteem, our mind begins to adjust to the new narrative, starting to believe what we say. This simple act of affirming is a powerful tool in the process of mental transformation. Affirmations work like a seed we plant in our minds. By repeating phrases like "I am capable of achieving my goals," "I have control over my thoughts and emotions," or "I am worthy of success and happiness," we begin to strengthen the neural connections that associate our self-knowledge and self-mastery with these positive ideas. It's not magic, but rather the science of neuroplasticity in action. The brain adapts to the new thought patterns we practice repeatedly. Just as physical training shapes the body, mental training with affirmations shapes the mind. The daily practice of affirming positivity begins to replace automatic negative thoughts with a growth mindset, where opportunities start to become visible. But for affirmations to be truly effective, authenticity is necessary. It's not enough to just repeat words without understanding their deep meaning. We must believe in them and at the same time act in accordance with them. This creates a connection between positive thought and action, solidifying personal transformation. When we affirm that we are capable of overcoming challenges or maintaining emotional control in the face of difficulties, we are in fact preparing our minds for action. We are telling our minds that yes, we can. And the mind then begins to work in our favor, creating a more positive reality aligned with our true potential. As Stoic philosophers taught, change begins within ourselves, and affirmations are the perfect tool to take that first step. Practicing gratitude: how to focus on the positive and change your perspective. In a world that seems to always move at a dizzying speed, where challenges and difficulties constantly surround us, it's easy to get lost in small frustrations and the negative aspects of life. Stress, anxiety, the fear of not being enough, all these thoughts end up becoming the focus of our minds. But what would happen if we consciously decided to change that focus? What if, instead of concentrating on what's lacking or what isn't working, we started paying attention to what we already have and what is going right? This is where the power of gratitude comes in, not just as a spiritual practice, but as a practical tool for mental transformation and emotional control. Gratitude is a powerful and transformative practice because it forces us to look at life differently. When we practice gratitude, we are not only grateful for what is tangible, but also for the small things we often overlook. The simple fact of waking up, having a mind capable of reflection, of breathing, and of having the chance to start anew. With each expression of gratitude, whether for something big or small, we begin to shift the mind's focus. This small adjustment, focusing on the positive instead of the negative, has the power to change our perspective on everything around us. It's a way to practice emotional detachment from frustrations, allowing mental resilience to strengthen, making us more capable of handling life's challenges. The daily practice of gratitude is also an excellent way to organize the mind. By focusing on what we are grateful for, we train the brain to seek out the good, the positive mindset that allows us not only to see the world with more optimistic eyes, but also to take more accurate and goal-aligned actions. Stoic philosophers already knew this. They taught us to look at situations with a perspective of radical acceptance, recognizing that by focusing on what we can control and on what we already have that is good, we can cultivate an inner peace that doesn't depend on external circumstances. When we cultivate gratitude, we begin to attract more of the things that benefit us, creating a cycle of positive energy that transforms the way we relate to ourselves and the world. Challenge your thoughts. How to question your limiting beliefs. How many times have you caught yourself saying, "This isn't for me, I'll never succeed, I'm not capable"? Thoughts like these are more common than we'd like to admit, and often become the invisible barriers that prevent us from moving forward. The problem isn't just the content of these thoughts, but the fact that we believe in them. They become our personal truths, limiting our choices and actions. But what if we said that these limiting thoughts are nothing more than false beliefs, that they can be questioned, challenged, and replaced with new, more positive and empowering thought patterns? This is the first step to mental transformation, challenging your own limiting beliefs. Self-knowledge is the key to this process. When we begin to question our own thoughts, especially those that block us, we become more aware of the self-imposed limitations. The mind, when unchallenged, tends to accept these beliefs as absolute truths. A growth mindset teaches us that everything is possible and that we are capable of changing our reality by altering the way we see ourselves and the world. This doesn't mean ignoring difficulties or challenges, but questioning whether we are truly incapable of overcoming them, or if we are simply allowing ourselves to be dominated by beliefs that lack foundation. Radical acceptance doesn't mean conformity. It means accepting where we are now, but also knowing that we can go beyond, with effort, reflection, and action. The practice of challenging our limiting beliefs is a daily exercise in self-mastery. Whenever a limiting thought arises, you can respond with a simple question. Is this really true? What proves that I'm not capable? By replacing these negative beliefs with more constructive affirmations based on real evidence, we begin to reprogram the mind. Automatic reactions that arise in the face of challenges start to give way to more controlled and focused responses. This is the power of emotional detachment and mental organization. The mental resilience that comes from this practice allows us not only to overcome obstacles, but also to grow stronger each day. As Stoic philosophers said, it's not external circumstances that affect us, but our interpretation of them. By challenging our own beliefs, we take control of the narrative of our lives. The importance of environment. How the world around you influences your thoughts. Have you ever stopped to reflect on how much your environment influences the way you think? The space we live in, the people we associate with, the media we consume. All of this has a profound impact on our mental organization and how we perceive the world. If we are surrounded by negativity, criticism, and stimuli that reinforce scarcity and fear, our minds will inevitably adjust to that. The environment has the power to shape our thoughts, for better or worse. This happens because our brain is naturally influenced by the information it receives all the time. Every person, every situation, and even every word we hear or read contributes to the construction of our mental reality. The Stoic mind teaches us that, although we cannot control everything around us, we can choose how to react to it. The environment is one of those things we often cannot control directly. But we can filter it. We can choose the people we associate with, the places where we spend our time, and even the content we consume on social media. A positive environment, with people who support and inspire us, can be the fuel needed for the development of a growth mindset. Likewise, a toxic environment can undermine our mental strength, making us believe in limitations that don't exist. Therefore, it is essential to create an environment that strengthens and nourishes our minds, with information and influences that encourage us to grow and transform our reality. This doesn't mean living in a bubble, far from life's difficulties. No, it's about consciously choosing the kind of energy we want to immerse ourselves in. Stoic practices like daily reflection, emotional detachment, and radical acceptance can help us maintain clarity, regardless of external influences. By creating an environment that feeds our minds, we cultivate a mental resilience that allows us to face the world with calm, balance, and, above all, emotional control. Stoic mindset: how to accept what we cannot change and focus on what we can control. Life is a constant sequence of ups and downs, and often we find ourselves in situations we cannot control. These could be challenges at work, conflicts in relationships, or even external circumstances entirely beyond our hands. At that moment, the question arises, what can we do? The answer comes from Stoic philosophers and one of their greatest teachings: to accept what we cannot change and focus on what we can control. It may seem simple, but this radical acceptance can be the secret to emotional liberation and the building of a strong mind. When we recognize that there are things we simply cannot alter, we lift a huge weight off our shoulders and gain clarity to act more effectively. True mental strength doesn't lie in resisting what we cannot change, but in finding power in what is within our capacity. Emotional control is precisely this: knowing that our reactions are what we can control, and from there, choosing how to respond to life situations. It's not about denying feelings or difficulties, but understanding that we are responsible for our reactions and attitudes. This practice is not just a philosophical theory, but a personal transformation tool that can be applied daily. By accepting that there are situations beyond our reach, we can redirect our energy to what truly matters: self-mastery, self-knowledge, and the development of our ability to respond to the world with wisdom and balance. Stoics also teach us that this shift in perspective is vital to changing our mental reality. When we cling to things we cannot control, we get trapped in a cycle of frustration and discouragement. But by focusing on what we can do, our attitudes, choices, and actions, we take a step toward a more fulfilling and conscious life. This is what Stoic philosophers called Stoic virtue: living in harmony with the nature of things, accepting what we cannot control, and responding to what we can with mental discipline and inner strength. This acceptance brings a deep peace and allows us to live with greater mental resilience, dealing with life's ups and downs with grace and wisdom. Creating new habits: how persistence is the key to sustaining positive thoughts. True change doesn't happen overnight. If it were easy, everyone would have already mastered their minds and achieved their goals. But the reality is that mental transformation requires more than intentions. It demands constant action, persistence, and the creation of solid habits. Positive thoughts don't arise spontaneously in every moment of life, especially when we are immersed in daily difficulties. However, the key to sustaining this growth mindset lies in continuous practice. Just as an athlete trains their body every day, our minds also need to be trained, reinforced, and directed toward what truly matters. It is in the day-to-day that mental reprogramming occurs, in those small choices, in the small actions we repeat until they become part of who we are. Creating new habits, especially those that strengthen our minds, can be challenging at first. Our natural tendency is to revert to negative thoughts and old behavior patterns because they are comfortable and familiar. But true mental strength comes when we manage to detach from these automatic patterns and cultivate new habits that lead us to success and personal transformation. Persistence is the key here. Even when negative thoughts try to emerge, we must exercise mental discipline and continue practicing positive affirmations, gratitude, and focus on what we truly want to achieve. This daily effort creates a solid mental organization where conscious thoughts begin to shape the reality we seek. However, it's important to remember that change doesn't happen instantly. As Stoicism teaches us, accepting that the path to self-mastery is a continuous process allows us to be more compassionate with ourselves. It's not about achieving perfection immediately, but persisting on the journey. With each conscious step taken toward our goals, we become stronger and more resilient. The daily practice of self-knowledge, emotional control, and mental discipline is what sustains these positive habits in the long term. The true secret lies in persistence, in the constant decision to act and think in a way aligned with the values and objectives we want to cultivate. Over time, you will realize that not only have your habits changed, but also your way of seeing the world and relating to it. Now that you know your thoughts do not define you, that you have the power to change your reality simply by transforming the way you think, what are you going to do with that? The key to mastering your mind is in your hands, and you don't need to wait any longer. The path to personal transformation begins with a simple step: the decision to stop being a hostage to your own fears and start consciously choosing your thoughts. Each positive thought, each action directed toward your self-knowledge and emotional control, will bring you closer to the person you are destined to be. Do not let fear, doubt, or past patterns decide who you are or what you can achieve. Now, I ask you a question. Are you ready to free yourself from the chains of a negative mind? Are you ready, from this moment on, to replace limiting beliefs and start building the life you've always dreamed of? Do not wait for change to happen on its own. It begins now, with you, here and now. Mental transformation is yours. You just need to take the first step. If this video made sense to you, share your experience in the comments. Which thought will you start replacing today? And to continue your journey of self-mastery and mental reprogramming, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and don't miss the next videos. The power to change your life is in your hands. Now, it's time to act.